Tell us how your message is received in your home country, in the Netherlands.
Well, luckily, as I said, and that is the good news, that Europe is changing. And it's not, unfortunately, yet the political elite or the governments that are changing. I mean, I quoted not only your own President Barack Obama, but also most of the European leaders, my own Prime Minister, the Chancellor of Germany, the French President, the UK Prime Minister. I mean, they have not changed their tune yet, but the people are changing their mind. The common people are in Europe are living today, every day again, under the consequences of this Islamic immigration, this lack of assimilation, this lack of politicians asking people to abide by our laws, our constitution and our values, to look in the other direction if people commit the most horrible crimes. So the good news is that not only in my own country, but that in most European countries, parties like mine have not a majority yet, but have and face increasing popularity. And that is a good thing.
Can you comment on the work that's been done by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Bridget Gabriel, and Noni Darwish?
Yes, well, I respect all three of them a lot. I know them very well, and I'm very proud to know them and to have such friends, American friends, that are so brave. And I try to work together with them. Ayaan Hirsi Ali was not only a dear friend, but also a colleague of mine. As a member of parliament at that time, my former party, we were MPs in the same political group in the Dutch parliament. And we did a lot of things together, and we got in a lot of trouble together, especially trouble, to be honest. But we had a very strong views on the Islamization. Certainly, her being an apostate and everything she experienced. Unfortunately, I have to be honest that I don't agree too much with her last book, where she says that she believes in a more moderate Islam. I told you in my introduction that there is only one Islam, and that is an Islam that is unfortunately not a book according to the Quran, according to the life of Muhammad. It's not a very moderate concept and not a very moderate ideology, because it's the word of Muhammad. Because the Quran is the word of Muhammad, and if you study, as I did, the life of Muhammad, certainly his Medina time, you will see that he did the most terrible things that still are an example to so many Muslims today. So I don't believe there is a moderate Islam, and I have to disagree with Ayaan Hirsi Ali there. But even if she was right, would be right and I was wrong, we cannot afford to wait 500 years until it will happen, because we face the problems today, existential problems that should be solved. We should not engage, with all respect to my three friends you mentioned, we should not engage in an intellectual discussion today. We should fight back against the Islamization that our countries face today.
Islamists are 20 years into using our constitution to destroy it. How can we appeal to politicians and judges who are smart enough to be afraid for their families, if not for themselves?
Well, you know, you have a big advantage compared to Europe, compared to most European countries, maybe except for Switzerland, and compared to my own country. You have the election. You elect almost everybody. You elect the mayors, you elect the sheriffs, you elect almost any person in office. We don't. Even in Holland, even the mayor is appointed by the government. The people have no choice whatsoever. So what I believe is that, and that is the most important thing, besides the grassroots organizations of the three people, like Brigitte Gabriel, who's doing fantastic work, like unlike those organizations, or besides those organizations, I should say, there is only one solution to change a policy, and that is to elect different members of Congress, to elect, I should not be careful being not an American, but let's say it in general, elect other prime ministers, other presidents. We all know who I'm talking about, right? So that's the only way to deal with it. Let them know that if they keep being politically correct, if they ignore the problem about Islam, if they refuse to answer your emails or your requests about what is happening on an Islamic school or in your neighborhood, or the fear you have about the safety of your children, your girls or whatsoever, if they don't do that, don't elect them anymore. There is only one strong message: send people out of office who are not serious about the problem.
Surely Islamization is not happening uniformly across Europe. Where is it happening more quickly versus less quickly? Is there anywhere where it's being rolled back? And if so, what are they doing right?
Well, unfortunately, it's worse all over the European Union. Maybe not the current government, but the former government of Denmark, who was not part of Schengen and was able to have their own immigration laws and their own border controls, was not the worst off. But yeah, at the end of the day, we all are. And as I said, if you allow me to elaborate a little bit on this question, a little bit longer than in the other questions, Europe is facing today, my dear friends, a catastrophe when it comes to the asylum seekers from Africa. You might have seen it on the TV or read it in the newspapers. Thousands, 100,000, millions of people are coming. They are not, most of them, 80–90%, are not real refugees. Are people who are making selfies when they arrive on the beach in Greece. Are people who are not fleeing for war. Are people who are economically driven. And unfortunately, they are allowed to enter our society. And I believe, and I advocated in my own Dutch parliament, that we should adopt the Australian approach. I don't know if you're familiar with the Australian approach. Australia has the so-called pushback policy, which means that any boat, without any exemption, who is trying to arrive in Australia will be pushed back from their navy. And if the boat is unsafe, if people are afraid that they would drown, they are even provided by new safe boats with water and food. But they are sent back from Australia. This is the only way. And because of that, in the last 1.5 years, not one refugee reached Australia by sea. Not one. Which means that not one person drowned, as happened in the Mediterranean in Europe, and that is crazy. And criminal human traffickers have no business either in that region. So what do we Europeans do? We have the navy of many European countries patrolling across the borders, across the sea borders of Northern Africa. But they are used not as a pushback mechanism, but as a taxi area. They are getting the refugees, take them to Greece or to Italy, and of course, if people know that they have a chance to be taxied to Europe, there will be even more, and unfortunately more people drown. And it's good business for the human traffickers, because they will provide them with even worse boats, because they know that after 10 miles the Navy will pick them up and help them trafficking to the rest of Europe. So it's not a good thing. And of course there are real refugees. Maybe 10% of those million of people who are coming to Europe today are real refugees. And even there I say, of course, those people should be provided safe havens. We don't want people to be killed in Syria or Iraq. But why not give them safe haven in Arab countries? I made a point at our Dutch Prime Minister in a debate very recently. You know, the country of Kuwait has 27 refugees. We have 1 million, they took 27. Saudi Arabia took none. The other Gulf states, they do nothing. They are very rich. So what I would say, we adopt the Australian policy and push the boats back, and the real refugees, let Saudi Arabia and the other countries take care of them. They have the money, they have the thing to do.
As a member of parliament, are there any efforts going on to stop providing free social services for Islamic immigrants to the Netherlands?
Well, that's a very good question, because one of the other reasons, besides this taxi thing that we do in Europe, is that of course we have, unlike America, a big fat welfare state. And Which means, which means that if you arrive in Holland, for instance, you will get a free housing. You will get free medical help. You will get what we call pocket money in Holland. You will earn even more without doing anything than your neighbor who is working for the minimum wage. So people are attracted by an enormous welfare state, which is not for the people who earned it. Let's be clear about that. I mean, there are Dutchmen who have worked for it for years, who deserved it, who paid for it, who, if they need it, I mean, we made the social security for them. So I asked once our parliament to change the law, our government, and I made a motion in parliament which unfortunately was rejected. And I said that, well, you need at least to be 10 years in our country, 10 years without any crime, 10 years where you learn the language, 10 years with a job, and maybe then you are allowed to have social security. But it was rejected, unfortunately.
So one questioner is asking about the relationship of the Muslim Brotherhood with Barack Obama. If you have any comments on that, either the relationship or the effect that they have on him.
No, I think it's a wise thing not to comment on that. I have diplomatic immunity though, but I want to keep it. I'm joking, but no, it's not. I know. No, I know. I'm joking.
We comment all the time.
Okay.
All right. Can you share with us the name of a person or a handful of people who have been extremely influential in your life?
Yes, well, I'm very much influenced by the leaders I mentioned. United Kingdom, Winston Churchill was a great example. I mentioned a few presidents of America, American presidents in my speech, but the one I admire the most is Ronald Reagan. He was a real example for me. Ronald Reagan was and is still one of my big heroes, American heroes, worldwide heroes, but also Israeli politicians that influenced me a lot. While I'm answering your questions, unfortunately, there are no Dutch politicians. But okay, things might change.
Can you give us some examples of what an Islamic US could be like in daily life?
Well, you know, Islam means Sharia law. And Sharia law, even today, not when it comes to criminal law, but how people marry and things like that, we already see today in United Kingdom that there are Sharia courts active. Often illegal, but still, they are active today. Which means, as you know, because this is Sharia law, that the woman is worth half of a man. That you will have genital mutilation of young girls. That you have, I can give you 500 examples, that you get Israel hate, that you get halal food, that you get all those things that do not belong to a society that is based on Christianity and Judaism. That is what we will face. You will face a lot of violence. I give you examples. I could have given you 20, 30 more examples about aggression. Aggression from, of course, not all the Muslims, but from Muslims who believe that there should not be anything else than Sharia law and Muslim law in our societies. And if you dress up, because it's a nice sunny weather, as a girl in a bikini or anything else, or if you drink, what happened in our country as well, if you drink water during Ramadan, you will be beaten up. You will have the worst time ever. But the most important thing, most important answer is that at the end of the day, our identity is gone and we will not be free people anymore. And that is why we should fight it.
Are there any political figures that you're aware of in America right now who have a good understanding of Islamization?
Well, there are a few, yes. There are a few, not too many, but there are some in your both national as in some states. I remember that a few years ago, and this is something that really helps. I don't know how many of you people were in America, but I took the initiative once with some friends to take some state politicians to Europe. I remember that we invited some people from the parliament from Tennessee, the state senate, I should call it, and we took them to Europe. And we showed them the streets of Brussels, Antwerp, Amsterdam, and I mean they were tough guys. They were guys who came from the American Army and Navy, and they were afraid on the streets. They were harassed, they were shouted at, and the groups came to them because they went into a wrong neighborhood, and it's all Islamic experience. And they went back to Tennessee, and they, you know probably better than I do, they had the first anti-Sharia laws in America, in the state of Tennessee, which is a very good thing. So yes, you have some, but unfortunately most of them are not too much involved in the issue. But then again, you can change that by electing others.
Our schools are indoctrinating our children with a whitewashed version of history that includes the notion that Islam is the religion of peace. Is that happening in Europe as well? And how do we counter it?
Yes, certainly do. I mean, the media, the educational system, unfortunately, certainly the state-owned media, and in Holland we have all the education is almost all state-owned, and the curricula that they use are the worst ever. And not only when it comes to Islam and the religion of peace, but also when it comes to Israel and all the other things. So, well, if you are bored of a school, you might change it, but also here it goes. We asked so many parliamentary questions, and we asked people, send us examples, send us ridiculous examples, and we do. And every time when we get an example, we get the Minister of Education to Parliament, or we asked written questions, parliamentary questions, and by our constitution they have to answer, and we get a lot of publicity with that, and sometimes things change. But that's the only way to deal with it, to make it transparent, to embarrass them if they make false accusation or say the wrong things about Islam, give them other examples, and you need politicians to do that.
Can you suggest one, maybe two actions that people in this audience could take tomorrow, next week, next year to help turn the tide?
Well, first, I will not say it anymore because I said already 500 times, elect better leaders. It's the main message. Elect, this is the process that you should make. Second, inform your friends, inform your colleagues, inform your family. Don't be afraid. If we are with many more people who show people, who tell people the true nature about Islam, once again, I'm not talking about the people, I'm not talking about the Muslims, but about the ideology of Islam, inform and educate people. This is an enormous important step that we should take. Don't be afraid. If we all do it, we will have tomorrow this whole room multiplied by maybe 10. There's no better way to start the day of tomorrow.
"100 years from now, where do you think European culture will be?"
Well, it depends on which direction we will go. You know, what is of concern is not only the minority that is making our countries like hell, that is committing these atrocities that we see today in the whole of the Western world, and certainly in the Middle East with all those terrorist attacks and the Islamic State and things like that. But the problem is the majority that allows it. Please think about that tonight if you go home. We saw as well in Nazi Germany, we saw in the communist Soviet Union, that also there it was just a minority who committed the crimes. But it was the majority who allowed it to happen. Without the majority who allowed it to happen, it would not have been possible. So make sure how your majority of Muslims in your country think. I told you about the surveys done by leftish institutions like the University of Amsterdam. More left you will not be able to find in Holland. And even their education proves that the majority of the Muslims in Holland believe that Islamic jihadis are heroes. That 80% of the Turkish youth, like I said, believe that violence is not a bad thing towards anybody who is non-Islamic. But also in a positive way, if we know that the majority, that it would not be possible, all those terrible crimes in Nazi Germany, in the Islam, in communist Russia or Soviet Union, it would not have been possible without the majority. It's also that the majority can change it. You are also a majority in your country today. Don't wait until you are a minority. Don't wait. Don't let it happen that the minority will become the majority. I mean, in Europe, it's getting in that direction. In Europe it is. By the year 2070, which looks very far away, Islam will be the biggest religion in the world. It will be bigger than Christianity. In some countries it's even sooner than 2070. So make sure that you stop the immigration from Islamic countries, and 2, Islamic immigrants that are in the United States, if they adhere, not by their, but by your laws, values and constitution, let them stay, and if not, my suggestion will be expel them.
All right, this questioner suggests that the only practical solution to the spread of Islam seems that it's ultimately going to lead to war and the destruction of the Islamic states. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I mean, you have to be blind not to see that there already is a war going on. We did not, and it's very important, we did not declare war on them. They declared war on us. Every day again. So we don't have to negotiate with them, we should fight them. I mean, this is what I learned. This is what I learned when I lived in Israel. If you negotiate with terrorists, they see it as weakness. It is weakness. You should not negotiate with Hamas or the Taliban or with the Islamic State or whatsoever. You should fight them. You should bomb them. You should get them out of the reality of this world. Let them go to the 72 versions or whatever country they have. That's where they should be.
All right, before we wrap it up, I just want to express our appreciation to the security personnel on site. Thank you all very much.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.